Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and all major podcast providers. So if you can't catch the show live, you can download it or simply use our free podcast player, which is available on our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you'd like to connect with us, please post a question on our wall on Facebook or send me a tweet at June Stoyer on Twitter. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. Today's show is sponsored by MyMumble.com, one of the leading voice chat service providers with locations all over the world. MyMumble offers free 5-seat voice chat service for life, as well as higher capacity plans for any group that requires a secure environment for confidential communication. Listeners of The Organic View can receive 15% off on monthly recurring power service by using the coupon code ORGVIEW. For more promotional offers, please visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. On today's show, Tom and I are going to talk to the wonderful Miles McGaughey, and we're going to be talking about some very interesting topics tonight. There's been some new developments with some news overseas in regards to the impact of neonicotinoids on bees, and we're also going to be talking about a webinar that was just held today. There's also some exciting news coming out of Hawaii in regards to the new right to know pesticide disclosure law. And hopefully, if we can get to it, there's a lot of other discussion going on in regards to the Wyoming Food Freedom Act, as well as industry's continued efforts to distort facts about neonicotinoids. So first, I'd like to welcome to the show my special co-host, Mr. Tom Theobald. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, June from Colorado, and don't call him wonderful. We'll never hear the end of it.
And joining us today is the amazing Miles McGaughey. Good afternoon, Miles, and hello from New York.
Such rare praise. Thank you so much, June.
Well, you know, I know that a lot of the beekeepers have a particular, affection for Tom, all this bromance that's going on, so it's always nice to get a little, June fan club going, but just kidding. Miles, it's always great having you on, and I really appreciate all the information and all the support that you've given to both me and to Tom over the years, and it's always great to have you on.
Well, I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Today, Tom and I both listened to, it's a webinar that was put on by the National Academy of Sciences, and it was on genetically engineered crops, and it was titled Past Experience and Future Prospects. It was quite interesting. One of the terms that really stuck out for me was this whole concept of what they refer to as PIPs, which are plant-incorporated protectants. So I know that both of you have a lot to say about this. So, Tom, what is your take on PIPs?
I think it should be PITs, because that's what it is. These are, if I understand what you're talking about correctly, these are highly toxic pesticides that they're now trying to promote as sort of nutritional supplements for plants. It's grotesque, I'm afraid. There's no other word for it.
And Miles, what is your view on PIPs?
Well, June, it's the old bait and switch all over again. They basically are trying to find another way to market the same stuff. They're running into some resistance, so they're changing their tack slightly to sell it, same stuff, just a little different packaging.
What I want to point out is that this isn't just exclusive to agriculture. This is a tactic that is used in every industry. Case in point, if you look at aspartame is now being marketed under a different name, and I've done a number of interviews with a very well-respected advocate. Her name is Judge Mary Nash Stoddard, who's a 30-year veteran on aspartame awareness. And it's just interesting that after all these years, Now it's starting to come up under different names. And I guess because of all of the negative press that has come out against neonicotinoids, they're shifting gears and pulling the same thing.
Absolutely. And to be fair, really now we need to stop talking about neonicotinoids because they're going to change the names on a lot of this stuff, and they can change one molecule and have a totally different product there to hand out to people. I think we should be talking about systemics in general now instead of just neonicotinoids, because they're getting enough static from good people like yourselves. They're going to just change the names and make them a little tougher to say and a little harder to follow.
Well, considering that the show has such tremendous popularity, I think maybe I'll put it out there to see if perhaps we should rename this particular segment and call it the Plant Incorporated Protectants View. I think that's a little bit of a mouthful. Yeah, that's a little too much. But the bottom line is there's a lot of pressure right now where they're suing. There's a lawsuit going on in Europe. And Tom, do you have any updates on that?
You know, I don't. It's the whole thing is sort of in flux. I think the public is beginning to get an understanding of just what has been done. But even the people who are close to these issues, I'm afraid, haven't quite grasped the enormity of the poisoning. And here we have a situation where the chemical companies are trying to promote even additional uses. I hope that I'm wrong, and I've told my friends that repeatedly. I hope that I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And I'd just like to say one more time that these chemicals, these neonicotinoids alone, and the other systemic pesticides would only add to this, but they represent billions of pounds of toxic equivalents to DDT. 1959 was the year of highest usage for DDT, 80 million pounds. These products, the last year we have figures on is 2009, and it was 3.5 million pounds, but they're 5,000 to 10,000 times more toxic than DDT. What that represents is about 7.5 billion pounds in toxic equivalents, and that probably represents only 5% of the usage. And it's very interesting if you look at that, because 95% of the usage of these neonicotinoids is as seed coatings, all right? 242 million acres last year. The EPA does not consider seed coating a pesticide use. This is a system that's completely out of control. And I don't see anyone in the driver's seat other than industry.
Definitely driven by the producers. And, they got a sweetheart deal from the American government back in the day to streamline everything in their favor and deal with the repercussions later. It's the opposite of how it sets up in Europe, where they have to prove that it's safe. Here in America, we have to prove that it's not safe. And it's hard to prove neonicotinoids as far as bee kills go, because the bees go away, we never see them. We can't test them. There's no pile of dead bees in front of the hive. When Furidan came out, there were bee kills, but you could see there were bee kills because they were stacked up in front of their hives, twitching and dead. Now, with the neonicotinoids, those bees go away, there's nothing to analyze, there's nothing to test, and they just disappear. Very tricky.
One of the things they've tried to frighten the beekeepers and others with is the threat that if they are denied the neonicotinoids, they'll have to go back to other pesticides that are even worse. Well, they aren't worse. They may be more acutely poisonous, and Furidan is a good example. Furidan was a terrible, terrible product. But we were able to survive Furidan. Even though we would get heavy bee kills in the spring, the bees in most cases could recover and still produce a honey crop. And the reason was we had two things then that we don't have today. The first is a relatively healthy population of bees, and the other is a relatively healthy environment. We have neither of those today. We are on the cusp of a major, massive ecological crisis, in my view.
Well, it's interesting. All over social media, there's a lot of discussion going on in regards to the pressure that's being put on the White House. There's so many people that have responded to all the different petitions, and I know Center for Food Safety, Friends of the Earth, Beyond Pesticides, Pesticide Action Network, they're really pounding away at this. And Tom, once again, can you refresh our listeners' memories about that memorandum that came out last June? It's almost a year now.
Which one are you talking about now? Are you talking about the presidential proclamation?
Yes, the memorandum.
Well, I think that gave the EPA something like 90 days to respond, and it wasn't long before the EPA told the White House that it would take longer than that. You know, this is very complicated, and it's the great mystery, and we still haven't heard too much from the EPA, and the things that we have heard are largely sleight of hand and smoke and mirrors intended to cover up their failures. Ultimately, though, their failures are going to be revealed, and the longer they try to prolong this fiction, the worse it looks.
Yeah. They're concentrating on the cover-up, which just makes them, complicit in the general illegality of what they're doing.
So let me ask you both a question. How scared do you think industry is? All I'm seeing is a lot of propaganda that's being put out there, which is negating the impact of neonicotinoids, and it's laughable. There's so much research out there. There's so many scientists who are well respected that have put out research which remains unchallenged.
It's kind of sad. The way that they've decided to handle the situation is by ferreting out the few people in beekeeping, and beekeeping is no different than a lot of other endeavors. There's a wide spectrum of different philosophies and methodologies and thoughts there, and what they try to do is they try to find a person or a group that's disgruntled with the status quo of any given beekeeping association somewhere, and find the few outspoken critics, and then hit them up with some funding maybe for a grant to study the issue, or maybe they give them an award, the Bear Stewardship to Beekeeping Award or something like that. And it's really just designed to fragment the beekeeping community, and they're doing that because you and Tom and other people like you are having an effect on them. They are hearing about this. People are writing in and getting on the internet and phoning their representatives. It is having an effect. They weren't spending millions of dollars 10 years ago to try and placate beekeeping. Now they are. And there's not enough money in their pockets to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. This is out. It's coming out every day. It's not going back in. The sooner they realize that and get on the program, the better for everybody. It really, really makes them look guilty as sin.
What I find interesting also is that the information that I provided from previous interviews that I've done, along with the work that I've done with Tom, the information has practically been buried, and I, once again, am just perplexed, because the thing is that it's information that's been out there for quite a while now, and I'm not going to stop doing the work that I'm doing, and neither is Tom, and obviously neither are you, Miles. But it's just interesting that they keep trying to avoid responsibility for chemicals that by design were meant to kill insects. And yet they're saying, no, this does not have the effect that all of these scientists are saying that it does.
Yeah. Well, I've learned from experience that they'll say just about anything that serves their purpose. It doesn't have to be based in fact or anything approaching fact. In many cases, they'll just flat out lie to promote their interests. These people are not, they're lacking in character. It's a very unfortunate situation, but they're in the driver's seat. Industry, the corporations are in control, and they, while they may be a little concerned with the noise that they're hearing about these pesticides, they think that if they throw enough money at it, if they throw enough money at the research people and the politicians that are indebted to them, that they will have their way. And so far, they have had their way.
And then they ran into Tom Theobald.
Well,
and we joke about it, but we feel kind of a little put off that they haven't tried to buy us off any.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think Tom has much of a business left to buy off.
Well, you're talking to the choir now. Yeah. Both of us are kind of on the rocks. You know, there's a guy named Phil Chandler I had the pleasure of meeting. He's known as the Barefoot Beekeeper, and he had one of the most succinct observations I've ever heard anybody speak to about the fact that these global corporations, these monster companies, they deal in lies. And they actually draw people to them that are good at that.
But Miles,
and that kind of corporate culture is propagated there, and you get promoted, and you get, accolades and stuff when you do a good job at it. And it's not a question so much of the science, it's a question about human nature.
But Miles, it's an obligation that the corporate executives have to make the company money. The corporation the corporation is recognized as a citizen, but the executives are bound legally to make the corporation money, regardless of what the products are that they're manufacturing. Even though they know what the consequences are, and they are dire, they are still obligated by law. So what does that say about the legal system? What's your take, Tom?
Well, they've constructed the legal system to provide for their, I call it criminality. I think that what they're doing are, in many cases, are crimes against nature and crimes against humanity. I wouldn't deny corporations the opportunity nor the right to make money, but I think they shouldn't be able to make money at the expense of the environment. They've turned the farmers from shepherds of the land into miners who've depleted their resource and extracted the wealth of the earth without replacing it. This is insanity, is what it is.
And it's the kind of situation that if, we know they're tasked with making money for their shareholders. If I was a shareholder in some of these companies, I'd be wondering, well, why are we heading towards this cliff here? I mean, they're probably going to still be around after the debacle that's faced here with the neonics. Why are they not taking the high ground and being the leader out of this? As a shareholder, if I bought into any of these diabolical companies, I'd want to know why we're not positioning ourselves for a victory here. They are headed down the road to defeat. Their methodology is to drag their feet, to take a long time, to make it a real slow process, but they are headed down. And if I was a shareholder, I would say, hey, you're fired. You're all fired.
What they're leading the farm community into is an unsustainable form of agriculture. And earlier this week, I gave a talk at a local historical society that my daughter Tracy is involved with, and I was approached by a farm wife afterward, and we talked about some of these questions, and she said, what do we do? How do we get out of this? And that's a dilemma for the farm community. They aren't led out of this. Instead, they're encouraged to participate. And if we lack anything, it's a land grant college system that is prepared to show the farm community another way.
Well, the next topic that I'd like to bring into the discussion is in regards to the Wyoming Food Freedom Bill. This is a really interesting bill, and from what I understand, Tom, this recently just passed, correct?
It just passed 2 days ago, yes. And
well, this bill, let me just explain what the bill is about. According to an article that appeared in farmtoconsumer.org by Sue Wallace, she basically wrote, where is it? She said, it's about our right to choose what we eat, from whom we can purchase our food, and how it is produced. It's about our basic right to gather as friends and neighbors and share the bounty of our pastures, our fields, our gardens, and our kitchens without interference. And it's interesting when you take a look at what the dairy industry has been through with the inability to purchase raw milk. I mean, that's ridiculous. I grew up on raw milk. But the fact that they're controlling how we grow food, who's able to buy what types of food, it's really out of control at this point. The government has no business telling us what we should be buying and from whom.
When I was a kid growing up, there was a neighbor lady who cooked lots and lots of cookies for all the kids around, and the children were dropping like flies. I mean, this is, everybody talks about the nanny government, and one of the things that raised the ire of Wyoming people was the institution of federal regulations that would have intruded on their lives, as this article brings out. There are, who's dying from eating their neighbor's cookies?
Well, the thing is that who's dying is industry, because they're not able to generate revenue from it. If they're losing market share, that's the bottom line. It's just like with the webinar today. There was a big focal point that was brought to the attention of the audience in regards to the economic factor, and that's what it boils down to with neonicotinoids. It's all about the money.
Sure, these are billion-dollar products. Yes.
Now,
I think Governor Matt Mead should be commended for signing that bill and turning it into a law that just basically allows unlicensed, unregulated sale of food, except meat, but including poultry, direct from producer to consumer. And isn't that the way it really should be? I'm reminded of a cowboy friend of mine. I grew up on a ranch in Walden, Colorado, and there was a guy from Wyoming who really inspired me to the belief that Wyoming is the way America was. And they really do live that way up there, and it isn't the Wild West, but they really have some far-ranging forethought on a lot of these important topics. So I want to commend Matt Mead for that.
I saw a passage in an article just recently that really stuck in my mind, and it was, you should shake the hand of the person who feeds you. You should know that person. You should know where that food comes from. And we have a lot of people that want to do that, and government should not stand in their way.
Well, Joel Salatin has been a very, very big advocate of that whole philosophy, and he's been on the show a couple of times. I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of years ago at a Mother Earth News festival, and he's phenomenal. He's very funny. He's really a very sharp guy, and he's just a pleasure to be around, but his books are fantastic, and he really lays it out. And he encourages people that read his books, as well as people who follow his work, to get to know who's growing their food. It's interesting. There's so many people who are disconnected to their food. They have no idea who's growing it, what the people who are growing it are subjected to, which is very important, because you wouldn't want your own kids or your own family members being subjected to all the pesticides and all the other elements that these folks are subjected to. But for some people, it doesn't matter. All they're concerned about is the food that gets on the table and the fact that it's there. How it gets there is of no consequence. And that is something that needs to change, because the bottom line is you're paying for it with your health.
Absolutely. We went from a quality standard where we paid more for better quality to a commodity standard where it didn't matter what quality the food or the corn or the pork or whatever was. It was all about how much of it there was. And all of us know by now that quantity kills you and quality heals you. It's just that simple.
I'd like to bring up something else that happened in Hawaii. There's an article that appeared on KITV.com, and it's about the Senate passes bill to require pesticide disclosure, and it's SB 1037 to cross over to the House on April 9th. And basically, this is Hawaii's right to know law when it comes to pesticides. So kudos to Hawaii. I think that's a huge step. There's so many things that come out of Hawaii, and just the thought that people have no idea what pesticides are used. And
Hawaiians,
they're now able to know, because of this disclosure, what kind of chemicals are being used by neighboring farms or just even their neighbors. I think that's fantastic.
Hawaiians have led the way for the last couple of years, and I think part of the reason is they live on an island and they recognize if we screw this up, we're in real trouble. So they want answers to these questions, and they have pushed for them.
Now, the next topic, we're kind of running out of time, but I'd like to address another subject that came up, and this is in regards to some news about threats to bees. There have been a number of studies that have come out, but once again, the studies keep coming out, and there's so much information that is circulating about the impact of neonicotinoids on bees, on butterflies, on so many different species. And once again, Tom, it goes back to what you've been saying, that we're dealing with a very powerful group that is relentless, and the bottom line is their goal is just to continue making a profit at the expense of everybody.
Yes. Yeah. It's certainly at the expense of the environment. If they were required to make reparations for the damage that's been caused, these products would not be profitable at all.
Well, I'm sure that next week we're going to have more stuff to talk about in regards to this continuing saga. I mean, I hate to be so dramatic about it, but this has been going on for so many years. And Tom, you and I have been pounding away at this, and it never seems to want to end. It has
to end. It has to end. And for a time, I thought maybe we could make some compromise, have some middle ground. But I think these chemicals must be removed from the environment immediately. We have to figure out how to do that. They're terribly damaging.
Well, it'll be interesting because of the fact that they are the companion technology to GMOs. So we already know what the farmers are experiencing once they choose to sell GMO, or once they choose to utilize the GMO technology. You can't really turn away from that.
The farmers have little choice in most cases.
But
June, I just wanted to end by saying this is a lot like the Gulf oil spill, but this one hasn't been capped. Yeah. They're still spewing this stuff out. It's still killing our environment. We all have to live on this planet. We have to stop it.
Yes, good point.
Perfectly stated, Miles. Thank you so much for joining me and Tom tonight, or this afternoon, Miles.
Hey, I appreciate everything you do. Keep doing it.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for joining me tonight.
Thanks, June.
And folks, tune in each week as Tom and I continue talking about the impact of neonicotinoids. This has been June Stoyer on the Organic V Radio Show. Have a great afternoon, everyone.